Chapter 1. The Diamond Bracelet. The crystal goblet exploded against the marble floor, a mere 3 feet from where I was standing. The white wine spread like a crimson stain across the restaurant's immaculate tiles. I didn't even twitch. 6 years spent waiting tables in Chicago's most high-end establishments had taught me one crucial thing. The truly wealthy rarely resorted to throwing things. It was always their companions, desperately trying to prove a point. "You incompetent little expletive deleted," the woman hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the crisp white tablecloth. "Do you even have the slightest idea who you're serving?" I maintained a neutral expression, my hands steady as I reached for the towel clipped to my apron. "I apologize, ma'am. I'll bring you a fresh—" "I don't want a fresh anything from you," she spat. She rose from her seat, her Valentino dress undoubtedly worth more than my annual rent. "I want you fired. Immediately." The man seated across from her hadn't so much as stirred. He remained perfectly still, his dark suit tailored to subtly accentuate what I suspected was a considerable amount of muscle underneath. His face was a study in sharp angles and cold calculation, the kind of handsomeness that made intelligent women think twice before crossing his path. But it was his eyes that truly caught my attention, black as a Chicago midnight, fixed on his companion with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Vivian," he said quietly, "just her name, nothing more." She ignored him, stepping closer to me. I could smell her perfume, something cloyingly French and utterly suffocating. "You people are all the same, invisible, replaceable. You think just because you're pretty you can get away with incompetence?" I hadn't actually spilled anything. The wine had been perfectly poured, the service impeccable. But I knew better than to argue. I desperately needed this job. My student loans weren't going to magically disappear, and nursing school tuition was bleeding me dry. "I apologize for any inconvenience," I repeated, my voice remaining steady despite the heat creeping up my neck. "Alessandro." Vivian turned to the man, her voice suddenly shifting to a honeyed, almost childlike petulance. "Aren't you going to do something? Your family practically owns this entire city. One word from you. Sit down." The command was delivered softly, almost gently, yet Vivian sank back into her chair as if her strings had been cut. I watched, fascinated in spite of myself, as the color drained from her flawlessly made-up face. The man, Alessandro, finally turned his gaze to me. His eyes moved from my face, down to the name tag pinned to my black vest, then back up with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena Russo, sir." Something flickered in his expression, a brief flash of something unreadable. "Russo?" "Yes, sir," I replied. "You're Italian." It wasn't exactly a question, but I answered anyway. "My grandparents were from Calabria." His lips curved slightly, though I wouldn't exactly call it a smile. "Of course they were." He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a money clip, thick with bills. He peeled off what appeared to be $500 bills and placed them on the table. "For your trouble, Miss Russo, and for your discretion regarding this evening." I stared at the money. "Sir, that's really not necessary. Take it." His voice remained quiet, but there was an unmistakable steel beneath the smooth silk. "And forget you saw us here tonight." Before I could respond, he stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced efficiency. Vivian scrambled to her feet, shooting me a look of pure venom that promised this was far from over. "Alessandro, where are you going? We haven't even ordered yet." "I've lost my appetite." He turned to leave, then paused, his eyes finding mine one last time. "You handled that well. Not everyone can maintain their dignity when someone's trying to tear it away." Then he was gone, Vivian hurrying after him on her precarious stiletto heels, leaving me standing in a puddle of spilled wine with $500 on the table and the unmistakable feeling that my life had just been irrevocably knocked off its axis. I should have left the money there, should have reported the entire incident to my manager, should have simply tried to forget the whole unsettling encounter. Instead, I pocketed the bills and spent the rest of my shift wondering why a man who commanded obedience with a single, softly spoken word would bother to compliment a lowly waitress. I found out the answer the next morning. when two men in identical black suits appeared at my apartment door, bearing a summons I knew I couldn't refuse. Chapter 2. When they came for me at dawn. The knocking started promptly at 6 a.m. Sharp, insistent, the kind of knocking that conveyed a clear message. They'd be perfectly willing to break down the door if I didn't answer it quickly enough. I was already awake, anyway. My nursing textbook lay open on the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of cold coffee forming a film beside my laptop. Finals were only 2 weeks away, and I'd been pulling all-nighters, desperately trying to juggle the demands of work and school. I peered through the peephole and felt my stomach plummet. Two men stood in the hallway, both easily over 6 feet tall, both wearing dark suits that did absolutely nothing to conceal the obvious bulk of shoulder holsters beneath. The one on the left sported a jagged scar that ran from his temple all the way down to his jawline. The one on the right was younger, with cold blue eyes and the kind of deceptively pretty face that probably made people underestimate him, until it was far too late. "Elena Russo," the scarred one called through the door. "We need you to come with us." Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to remain silent, to pretend that I wasn't home. But they clearly knew I was here. I could see the telltale shadow of my movement distorted through the peephole's fisheye lens. "Who are you?" I called back, surprised and somewhat proud that my voice didn't tremble. "Mr. Vitali sent us. He requests your presence at his estate." Vitali, Alessandro's last name. It hit me with a cold, sickening rush of dread. I should have known, should have recognized him from the society pages, from the hushed whispers that circulated through Chicago's service industry circles. Alessandro Vitali, heir to the infamous Vitali crime family, the man who controlled everything from the city's docks to City Hall with an iron fist concealed within an expensive Italian leather glove. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, trying to sound more assertive than I felt. "Leave, or I'm calling the police." The pretty one actually laughed, and the sound was somehow more terrifying than if he'd threatened me outright. "Miss Russo, Mr. Vitali doesn't exactly make requests that he expects to be refused. We can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." My phone sat innocently on the kitchen counter, just a little too far away to grab and dial before they could easily break through my cheap apartment door. I was a 24-year-old nursing student who could barely afford the rent. I had absolutely no illusions about my ability to fight off two armed men. "Why does he want to see me?" "That's between you and Mr. Vitali. But I can tell you this. You're not in any trouble. If you were, we wouldn't be knocking." The implication hung heavy in the air between us. If I were actually in trouble, I'd probably already be dead, or simply vanished without a trace. Somehow, that wasn't nearly as reassuring as he probably meant it to be. "Give me 5 minutes to change," I said. "You have 3. I threw on a pair of jeans and a sweater, shoved my feet into my boots, and grabbed my cell phone. Though what good it would actually do me, I had no idea. Who would I even call? The police, who were most likely on Vitali's payroll. My aunt in Boston, who had specifically warned me about the inherent dangers of Chicago. When I opened the door, Scarface, I'd already started thinking of him that way, gestured toward the stairs. "After you, Miss Russo." The black SUV waiting at the curb looked like it cost more than my entire apartment building. The interior was all supple leather and darkly tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed both money and menace in equal measure. I climbed in, flanked by my silent escorts, and tried desperately not to think about how many other people had sat in this same seat on their way to somewhere they'd never actually returned from. We drove through Chicago's heavy morning traffic in complete silence, heading north along the lakefront. The neighborhood steadily grew wealthier, modest brownstones giving way to sprawling mansions hidden behind ornate iron gates and mature trees. When we finally turned through a pair of gates that looked like they belonged to an actual Italian villa, I felt my breath catch in my throat. The Vitali estate sprawled across what had to be 10 acres of prime lakefront property. The mansion itself was 3 stories of old-world elegance, all stone and arched windows, with wings that spread out like welcoming arms that promised anything but a warm welcome. "Out," the pretty one said, opening my door. My legs trembled slightly as I stepped out onto the circular drive. The morning sun glinted off the windows, windows that probably cost more than my entire education. Somewhere nearby, birds were singing, seemingly oblivious to the grim fact that this breathtakingly beautiful place was built on a foundation of blood and fear. The front door swung open before we even reached it, revealing a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she had seen absolutely everything and been impressed by none of it. "Miss Russo," she said, her voice tinged with a faint Italian accent. "Mr. Vitali is expecting you. This way, please." I followed her through a foyer that legitimately belonged in a museum, past priceless oil paintings that were undoubtedly originals, up a sweeping staircase that curved like a lover's spine. My escorts had mysteriously disappeared, leaving me alone with this stern woman who moved through the opulent mansion like a ghost who had haunted its halls for decades. She stopped in front of a set of imposing double doors on the second floor and knocked twice. "Enter!" came that voice I instantly recognized from the restaurant, quiet, commanding, and utterly impossible to ignore. The woman opened the door and gestured for me to walk through. And there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the vast expanse of Lake Michigan, was Alessandro Vitali, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, holding a coffee cup and looking at me like I was some sort of complex puzzle he'd been trying to solve all night long. "Miss Russo," he said, his voice smooth and low. "Thank you for coming. We have a great deal to discuss." The doors closed softly behind me with a quiet click that sounded ominously like the ceiling of a tomb. "You didn't exactly give me much of a choice," I managed to say, my voice sounding far braver than I felt. His smile was sharp as a blade. "No, I didn't. But then, neither did my grandfather when he called me at 4 this morning to inform me that I'm getting married to you today." Chapter 3. The Grandfather's Decree. I must have misheard him. I had to have misheard him, because the alternative that this dangerous, undeniably handsome man had just stated, that we were getting married, was completely and utterly insane. "I'm sorry." "What?" Alessandro carefully set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision and turned to face me fully, the morning light streaming through the windows illuminating every plane of his face. He looked younger than I'd initially thought, maybe 30, 32 at most. But his eyes were ancient, weighted down with the burden of things I couldn't even begin to imagine. "My grandfather is dying," he said, his tone conversational, almost casual, as if we were simply discussing the weather. "Cancer. The doctors give him 3 months, maybe 4. He is the bedrock of the Vitali family. And before he dies, he wants to see me settled, married to a good Italian girl from a respectable family. I'm not. I'm a waitress, a nursing student. I'm nobody." "Your grandfather was Lorenzo Russo." The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. I hadn't heard it in years. Not since my mother died when I was 16. She'd never talked about her father. Never explained why we'd left Italy when I was just a baby. Why we'd briefly changed our last name from Russo to Ross before changing it back again after her death. "How do you know that?" "I know everything about you, Elena." He moved closer, each step measured and almost predatory. "I know you're 24 years old, enrolled in Rush University's nursing program, and working 3 different jobs to pay your tuition. I know you've lived in Chicago for 8 years, that you have no siblings, no parents, just an aunt in Boston who you call once a month. I know you grew up in New York, in a neighborhood where your mother worked tirelessly as a seamstress, keeping her head down and her past carefully buried. A shiver of fear crawled up my spine, cold and unwelcome. You had me investigated. Last night, after dinner." He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne. Something dark, musky, and undeniably expensive. My grandfather reviewed the security footage from the restaurant. He saw Vivian's disgraceful display. He saw you, and he saw your name tag. "I don't understand." Lorenzo Russo was one of the most respected men in Calabria. He steadfastly refused to join the 'Ndrangheta, refused to be corrupted by them. When they murdered his son, your uncle, he sent your mother away to protect her. He died 10 years ago, still respected, still clean. Alessandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My grandfather desperately wants to believe that honor still exists in our world. He wants to believe that I can actually build something better than what he built. And when he saw you, a Russo girl, working honestly, retaining your dignity, while Vivian was trying her best to strip it away, he decided that you were the answer. I'm not an answer. I'm a person with a life, with plans that definitely don't include marrying a complete stranger. I know. For the first time, something that looked suspiciously like regret flickered across his face. But my grandfather doesn't make mere suggestions, Elena. He issues decrees. And when he decrees that I marry Lorenzo Russo's granddaughter today, the only alternative is a brutal and bloody war within my own family. My cousins, my uncles, they're already circling, just waiting for any sign of weakness. If I refuse him now, while he's on his deathbed, I lose everything. The family splinters. People die. So you're asking me to save your crumbling empire by completely destroying my own life? No. His hand came up, not quite touching me, just hovering near my face as if he wanted to, but knew better. I'm asking you to save lives, potentially hundreds of them. The people who work for my family, who depend on us for protection, for their livelihoods, for the fragile peace we've somehow managed to build with the other families. And in return, I'm offering you everything you need. Your nursing school tuition paid in full. Security, wealth, protection. I don't want your blood money. Everyone wants something, Elena. Name your price. I wanted to throw his audacious offer right back in his face, to storm out of his ridiculously opulent mansion and out of his life forever, never looking back. But I wasn't stupid. I'd seen what happened to people who dared to refuse the Mafia. And as I stood there watching this man who commanded respect with a single word, who'd built an empire on violence and fear, I realized that he was just as trapped as I was, maybe even more so. Trapped by legacy, by duty, by the crushing weight of hundreds of lives that depended on his every decision. If I say no, then you walk out that door and you never see me again. I stated more than asked. But my grandfather will send you gifts, unwanted money, unwelcome guards. He'll try to win you over, to convince you, because he's decided that you're the one who can somehow redeem his family. And when he finally dies, my cousins will definitely remember that you refused me, that you were offered a place within this family and then summarily rejected it. They'll see you as a grave insult to our honor. You're saying I'm dead either way. I'm saying you're far safer as my wife than you are as the woman who publicly embarrassed the Vitali family. And I'm saying... He stopped abruptly, something raw and vulnerable crossing his face before he quickly locked it away behind his carefully constructed mask. I'm saying I will never hurt you. I'll give you your own wing of the house, your own life. All I need is your name on a marriage certificate and your presence at certain family functions. That's all. That's all? I repeated hollowly, the words feeling flat and lifeless on my tongue. Just my entire future. Yes. At least he was honest. At least he wasn't trying to pretend that this was anything other than what it truly was. A transaction. A cold-blooded business deal sealed with empty wedding vows that meant absolutely nothing. I thought of my cramped studio apartment with its perpetually leaking ceiling. My mountain of student loan debt that seemed to grow larger with each passing semester. The way I routinely fell asleep hunched over textbooks and woke up utterly exhausted for another grueling shift at the restaurant. I thought of the hard-won freedom I'd fought so desperately for, the fiercely guarded independence I'd built from absolutely nothing. Then I thought of the hundreds of people who could potentially die simply because I refused to sign a single piece of paper. I have conditions. I heard myself say, the words somehow escaping my lips against my better judgment. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something definitely shifted in his eyes. A flicker of relief perhaps. Or maybe even grudging respect. Name them. I finish nursing school, and I work at a hospital when I graduate. I'm not going to be some pampered trophy wife who just lunches and shops all day. Agreed. I want my own space just like you said, and you don't. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. You don't touch me. This isn't a real marriage, and I want you to treat it as the business arrangement it is. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Agreed. And when your grandfather dies, if we can somehow find a way to safely end this arrangement, we do. I get my life back." He remained quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine for something I couldn't possibly name. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, almost gentle. "I will do everything in my power to give you your freedom, Elena. I promise you that." It wasn't enough. Nothing could possibly be enough to make this right. But it was all I had. "Then I guess I'm getting married today." Alessandro nodded once, the gesture sharp and final. Then he pulled out his cell phone and made a call that would irrevocably change everything. "Prepare the chapel," he said quietly into the phone. "We have a wedding in 2 hours." Chapter 4. Blood on the Altar. The chapel was tucked away in the east wing of the mansion, small and intimate, with breathtaking stained glass windows that cast multicolored light across the cool marble floors. I stood in a lavish bedroom that wasn't mine, wearing a stunning dress that wasn't mine, while 3 women I'd never met fussed over my hair and makeup as if I were actually a bride, instead of a prisoner with slightly better accommodations. The dress was undeniably beautiful, I had to admit. Ivory silk that flowed like liquid water, simple and elegant, with delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline. Someone had somehow managed to guess my size perfectly. Probably the very same person who had compiled that terrifyingly thorough dossier on my entire life. "You're very lucky," one of the women said, her English tinged with a noticeable Italian accent, as she pinned my dark hair into soft, cascading waves. "Mr. Vitali is a good man, very protective. My daughter works in his office. He personally paid for her mother's surgery last year, and asked for absolutely nothing in return. A good man who also ran a sprawling criminal empire. A good man who'd had me thoroughly investigated, then essentially kidnapped me at dawn, and offered me a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. But I didn't say any of that out loud. I simply smiled vaguely and thanked her, trying my best not to dwell on the unsettling fact that in just over an hour, I'd be legally married to a complete stranger. The door opened without so much as a courtesy knock, and the steel-haired woman from earlier entered the room, carrying a small velvet box. "The other women will finish here," she stated, her tone brooking no argument. "I need a moment alone with Miss Russo." The makeup artists and hairstylists scattered like autumn leaves before a strong wind. When we were finally alone, the woman closed the door firmly and fixed me with a gaze that could have stripped paint from the walls. "My name is Lucia," she said, her voice low and steady. "I have served the Vitali family for 30 years. I helped raise Alessandro after his mother tragically died. I'm not telling you this for sympathy." She moved closer, and I saw something fierce and undeniably protective burning in her dark eyes. "I'm telling you this so that you understand that I know him. I know exactly what he's capable of. The violence, the ruthlessness, the agonizingly cold decisions that keep him awake at night. But I also know his heart, or what's left of it anyway. And I'm telling you unequivocally that he didn't actually have to offer you any conditions at all. He didn't have to promise you your freedom, or even your own life. He could have simply taken whatever he wanted because that's what men in his position generally do. Should I somehow be grateful for that? No. But you should at least understand that he is trying." She opened the velvet box, revealing a ring so stunning that it actually made me gasp. A breathtaking emerald, surrounded by shimmering diamonds, set in intricately detailed platinum. Old-world craftsmanship that spoke volumes about generations of wealth and power. This was his mother's, and his grandmother's before that. He specifically wanted you to wear it. I stared at the ring, at this priceless piece of Vitali family history that I had absolutely no right to wear. "I can't. You can. You will. Because whether you actually like it or not, you are about to become a Vitali. And in this world, symbols matter more than almost anything else. This ring tells everyone who sees it that you are under Alessandro's personal protection, that you now belong to him, and that anyone who even thinks about touching you will ultimately have to answer to him." She took my hand before I could even protest, and slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, of course. Heavy, beautiful, and utterly terrifying. "One more thing, Elena," Lucia said softly, her gaze unwavering. "He won't intentionally hurt you, but others certainly will try. His enemies will inevitably see you as a weapon to use against him. His own family members will test you, push you, try to find your weaknesses, and exploit them without mercy. You need to be strong, Elena, stronger than you've ever been in your entire life. Can you do that? I looked at this enigmatic woman who had somehow raised a monster, and loved him anyway, who was simultaneously warning me and welcoming me with the same breath. I don't know, I admitted honestly, but I'll try. She smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her usually stern face into something almost warm and inviting. That's all any of us can actually do. The ceremony itself was brief and surreal, like some sort of bizarre out-of-body experience. Alessandro's grandfather presided from his wheelchair, a wizened, frail man with eyes that still burned with a fierce intelligence despite his failing body. A priest spoke ancient words that I barely even heard over the deafening rushing sound in my ears. Alessandro slid a simple platinum band onto my finger, his hands surprisingly steady, while mine trembled almost uncontrollably. When he kissed me, because apparently that was a required part of the bizarre spectacle, it was gentle, almost chaste, his lips barely brushing mine before he pulled away. But I still felt the heat of it, the subtle promise of something that terrified me far more than all of his empty threats and audacious offers combined. You may now present Mr. and Mrs. Vitali, the priest intoned. Mrs. Vitali. In the space of a single hour, I had somehow become someone else entirely. The old Don beckoned us closer, his voice a raspy, papery whisper. You honor our family, Elena. You give me hope that we can actually become more than what we have been. Promise me that you'll help him become the man he should be. What could I possibly say to that? To this dying man who had so meticulously orchestrated my kidnapping and forced marriage, all because he desperately wanted to believe that his ruthless grandson could somehow still be redeemed? So I lied. I promise. His answering smile was beatific, almost angelic, and I hated myself just a little bit for giving him that fleeting moment of false peace. The rest of the day blurred together into a chaotic montage. A lavish reception attended by dozens of men in impeccably tailored, obscenely expensive suits with cold, dead eyes, and women dripping with enough jewels and thinly veiled judgment to sink a battleship. All of them subtly evaluating me, calculating my worth, searching for any sign of potential weakness. Alessandro stayed close by my side, his hand a warm and reassuring brand at the small of my back. His imposing presence a solid wall between me and the sharks silently circling in his impeccably decorated living room. It was nearing midnight when the last of the unwanted guests finally departed, and I could finally escape to the lavish bedroom that Lucia had so thoughtfully prepared for me. Not Alessandro's room, of course, per our explicitly stated agreement, but a spacious suite in the west wing of the mansion that was easily bigger than my entire rundown apartment. I had just kicked off the ridiculously uncomfortable heels that had been slowly killing me all day when there was a polite knock at the door. Come in, I called out, fully expecting to see Lucia's familiar, comforting face. Instead, Alessandro entered the room. He was still wearing his perfectly tailored wedding suit, but his tie was now loosened, and his dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. He looked both exhausted and undeniably dangerous, and far too human for my own personal comfort. I wanted to make sure you were all right, he said, his voice low and surprisingly gentle. I'm married to a notorious mob boss and currently living in a sprawling mansion that probably has several bodies conveniently buried somewhere in the foundation. I'm absolutely fantastic. His lips twitched almost imperceptibly. Fair enough. We stood there in awkward silence, two complete strangers inexplicably bound together by a legally binding marriage contract, until I simply couldn't take it anymore. Why me? I asked, the question finally escaping my lips. Really? There must be literally dozens of other Italian girls whose grandfathers your family respects and approves of. So why me? Go through all this for a waitress you met once? He was quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the dark lake. Because when Vivian tried to humiliate you, you didn't break. You didn't cry or beg or fight back. You just stood there with your dignity intact. And I thought he stopped, his jaw working. I thought, there's someone who understands what it means to survive with your soul intact. And maybe if I'm going to spend my life trying to build something better than what my father and grandfather built, I need someone like that beside me, even if it's just for show. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process this glimpse of the man beneath the monster. Thank you. I finally managed for being honest. He turned, and in the dim light of the bedroom, his face was all shadows and sharp edges. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow you meet the rest of the family, and they won't be as welcoming as the grandfather. He was almost to the door when I called out. Alessandro. Yes. Are we safe here? He smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. I have 200 men who would die to protect what's mine. You're the safest you've ever been in your life. What's mine? Not you're safe. Not I'll protect you. What's mine? And that, I realized as the door closed behind him, was the most terrifying thing he'd said all day. Chapter 5. When his world came for me, I woke to gunfire. The sharp crack-crack of automatic weapons shattered the pre-dawn quiet, followed by shouting in Italian, the screech of tires, the heavy thud of something or someone hitting the ground. I rolled out of bed, my heart hammering, my nurse's training kicking in even as my mind screamed at me to hide. The bedroom window overlooked the front drive, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. 5 black SUVs had crashed through the front gate, disgorging at least 20 armed men. But they were met by twice that number pouring from the mansion, from the guard houses, from positions I hadn't even known existed. The Vitali estate had transformed into a war zone in seconds. And in the middle of it all, directing his men with hand signals and barked commands, was Alessandro. He'd shed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was already stained with blood. His or someone else's. Couldn't tell. He moved like violence made flesh, like he'd been born to this, firing with precision while using a pillar for cover. I should have stayed in my room. Should have locked the door and hidden in the bathroom, like any sane person. Instead, I grabbed my phone and ran. The hallway was chaos. Staff members being herded to safe rooms by armed guards. The rattle of gunfire echoing through marble corridors. The acrid smell of smoke beginning to fill the air. I followed the sound of the fighting, my bare feet silent on the cold floors until I reached a window that overlooked the courtyard. That's when I saw him fall. Alessandro went down hard, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming across his white shirt in a spreading stain. 2 of his men immediately formed a shield around him, returning fire. But I could see it wasn't enough. The attackers were pressing forward, and Alessandro was trying to stand but couldn't. His face gray with pain or blood loss or both. I didn't think. I just moved. The side entrance to the courtyard was unguarded. Everyone had rushed to the front. I burst through it, my nursing instincts overriding every survival instinct I had, and ran toward Alessandro's position. Are you insane? One of his guards shouted, trying to push me back. Get inside. I'm a nurse. Let me see him. The guard looked torn between following orders and letting me help his boss. Alessandro made the decision for him. Let her through, he ground out, his jaw tight with pain. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands already moving to assess the wound. Shoulder injury through and through from what I could see, but close to major vessels. He was losing blood fast, his shirt soaked, his face too pale. You need a hospital, I said, pressing my hands against the wound to slow the bleeding. Not an option, he tried to sit up, winced. We need to get back inside now. You'll bleed out. Then stop the bleeding here. Another burst of gunfire made me flinch, but I held my position, keeping pressure on the wound around us. His men were winning, the attackers falling back, regrouping near their vehicles. But it wasn't over. I could see reinforcements arriving, more men with more guns, and we were completely exposed. Can you walk? I asked. Can I breathe? Then I can walk. With help from 2 guards, we got Alessandro to his feet and back into the mansion. The fighting continued outside, but the house itself was locked down. Every entrance guarded, every window a firing position. I commandeered a sitting room on the first floor, ordered everyone out except Lucia, and turned it into a makeshift trauma bay. Alessandro sat in a leather chair while I cut away his ruined shirt, revealing a body that was all lean muscle and old scars. Evidence of a violent life that suddenly felt very, very real. "This is going to hurt," I warned, cleaning the wound with vodka from the bar because I didn't have time to find proper antiseptic. "I've been shot before. That's not comforting. Wasn't meant to be." I worked quickly, efficiently, packing the wound to stop the bleeding, fashioning a pressure bandage from torn sheets that Lucia provided without question. Outside, the gunfire was dying down, but the damage was done. 3 of Alessandro's men were dead, 7 wounded, and the front gate was a twisted wreck. "Who are they?" I asked, tying off the bandage. "Bonanno family?" Alessandro's voice was tight with pain and fury. "They think the marriage weakened me, that taking a wife makes me soft." "Does it?" His black eyes met mine, and there was nothing soft in them. "No, but they'll learn that the hard way." The sitting room door burst open, and a man strode in, late 20s, handsome in a cruel way, with Alessandro's dark coloring but none of his control. His gaze raked over me with undisguised contempt before fixing on Alessandro. "This is her fault," he spat. "You marry some nobody, and immediately we're attacked. Your judgment is compromised, cousin. Careful, Marco." Alessandro's voice was deadly quiet despite his injury. "You're speaking about my wife. Your wife is a liability. Look at you, shot because you were distracted, weakened. The family should have been consulted before you made such a reckless decision. The Don approved the marriage. The Don is dying and sentimental." Marco moved closer, and I instinctively shifted between him and Alessandro. The action made Marco laugh, harsh and mocking. "Oh, this is perfect. The little waitress thinks she can protect you. How touching. Get out, Marco." Alessandro tried to stand, but the movement made him sway. I caught his arm, keeping him seated, very aware of the fresh blood seeping through the bandage. "He needs rest," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "And you need to leave." Marco's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise. "You don't give orders here, princess. You're a pretty face and a pedigree. Nothing more. You want to survive in this family? Learn your place." The crack of Alessandro's fist connecting with Marco's jaw echoed through the room. His cousin stumbled back, blood trickling from his split lip, shock and rage warring on his face. "Touch her again," Alessandro said softly, dangerously, "and I'll kill you, family or not." Marco straightened, dabbing at his bleeding mouth. "You'll regret this, both of you," he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence he left was thick with tension and unspoken threats. "He's right, I said quietly. "I am a liability." "No." Alessandro caught my hand, his grip firm despite his injury. "You just saved my life. You ran into a firefight to help me when you could have stayed safe. That's not a liability, Elena. He stopped, something raw and unguarded crossing his face before he locked it away. "That's more than I deserve." I looked down at our joined hands, at the blood, his blood on my skin, at the emerald ring that marked me as his, and I realized that somewhere between the forced wedding and this moment, something had shifted. I'd stopped seeing him as just my captor, and he'd stopped seeing me as just a pawn. We'd become something more complicated, something dangerous, something that could get us both killed. Chapter 6. The Safe Room Confession. They moved us to the panic room while Alessandro's men secured the estate. It was buried deep in the mansion's foundation, steel-reinforced walls, independent air supply, enough weapons and supplies to withstand a siege. The kind of room that shouldn't exist outside of spy movies. But here it was, monitoring every corner of the property on dozens of screens. Alessandro sat in the chair I'd forced him into, his face too pale, his breathing shallow. The bleeding had slowed, but not stopped, and I knew he needed real medical attention. "You need a doctor," I said for the 10th time. "Can't risk it. Hospital records, questions, police reports." He leaned his head back, eyes closed. "I've had worse." That's a terrible metric for healthcare decisions. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You sound like a nurse." "I am a nurse. Or I will be if I survive being married to you long enough to graduate." "Fair point." I checked his bandage again, not liking how much blood was seeping through. In a real hospital, I'd have him in surgery. Here, in this underground bunker, I had basic supplies and prayers. Tell me about Marco, I said, trying to keep him talking, keep him conscious. Why does he hate you? Alessandro's eyes opened, dark and assessing. You don't want to know. I'm already in this. I might as well understand what I'm in. He was quiet for a long moment, and I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with old pain. Marco's father was my uncle, my father's younger brother. He thought he should have been Don when my grandfather stepped down, but the family chose my father instead. Uncle Antonio never forgave that. He raised Marco to believe he'd been cheated, that the leadership should have been his. When my father died 3 years ago, and I took over, it got worse. How did your father die? Car bomb meant for me. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I heard the guilt beneath it. I was supposed to be in that car. Changed my schedule at the last minute. Alessandro. They never found who did it. Could have been rivals. Could have been someone in the family who wanted a different successor. Could have been Antonio using the chaos to make his own move. He met my eyes. I've built my life on not knowing who killed my father, on making alliances with men who might have ordered his death. That's what this world is, Elena. Constant suspicion, constant threat, and you walked into it to save my life. I cleaned my hands on a cloth, trying to process everything he'd told me. If it's so dangerous, why not leave? Why not take your money and disappear? Because 200 families depend on me for their livelihood. Because if I leave, men like Marco take over, and everything becomes bloodier, more violent. Because he stopped, jaw clenching. Because this is all I know how to be. There was something devastatingly honest in that admission. I moved closer, checking his pulse, too fast but steady. His skin was clammy under my fingers. You're more than this, I said quietly. You offered me freedom when you could have just taken what you wanted. You protected me from Marco. I hesitated. You haven't broken any of your promises to me. The day is not over yet. Stop that. Stop acting like you're nothing but a monster. His hand came up, catching mine against his chest. I could feel his heart racing beneath my palm. Could see something vulnerable and desperate in his eyes. What if I am, Elena? What if the best I can offer you is a gilded cage and protection from enemies I created? His thumb traced over my knuckles, the touch gentle despite the violence in his words. What if marrying you was the most selfish thing I've ever done? Because for one moment, I wanted something good in my life, even if I don't deserve it. My breath caught. This was the man beneath the armor, beneath the cold commands and calculated decisions. This was Alessandro Vitali, stripped bare by blood loss and exhaustion and something that looked dangerously like longing. You're not thinking clearly, I managed. You've lost blood. You're in shock. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. He pulled me closer, his good hand cupping my face with a tenderness that made my chest ache. You terrify me, Elena. You ran into gunfire to save me. You stood up to Marco. You're everything I'm not, brave and honest and good. And I'm going to corrupt you just by keeping you here. Then let me go. The words hung between us. A test we both knew I was failing because I didn't want to go. Not anymore. Not after seeing him bleed. After hearing the truth in his voice. After feeling the weight of his world settle onto my shoulders and realizing I was strong enough to carry it. I can't, he whispered. God help me. I can't. Then he was kissing me, and it was nothing like the chaste press of lips at our wedding. This was desperate and hungry. His mouth moving against mine like I was oxygen. And he was drowning. I should have pulled away. Should have remembered this was just a marriage of convenience. That we'd agreed to keep our distance. Instead, I kissed him back. My hands found his hair, careful of his injury. And he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat racing through my veins. His tongue traced my lower lip, seeking entrance. And I opened for him, tasting blood and danger and something sweeter beneath it all. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This is a mistake, he said. But his hand was still cradling my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. Probably you should hate me. I should do a lot of things. He laughed, the sound rough and pained. What are we doing, Elena? I don't know. But right now, you need to rest before you pass out. We can figure out the rest later. Bossy, you married a nurse. What did you expect? Something softened in his expression, and for a moment, he looked almost peaceful. I expected a transaction, a business arrangement. I didn't expect you. Before I could respond, the panic room door opened. Scarface, whose real name I'd learned was Dante, stood in the entrance, his expression grim. Boss, we've secured the perimeter. But we've got a problem. Alessandro straightened, the vulnerability vanishing behind his usual mask of control. What problem? The Bonanno family is claiming the attack was retaliation for you, killing one of their lieutenants last month. They're saying you broke the peace accord, that this marriage was a distraction to hide your aggression. Dante's eyes flicked to me, then back to Alessandro. They're calling for a sit-down. All 5 families, tomorrow night. Let them call. Boss, if you don't go, it's an admission of guilt. They'll have grounds to move against you with the other family's blessing. Alessandro stood, swaying slightly, his face going even paler. I moved to support him, but he waved me off. Then I go, set it up. You can't, I protested. You're injured. You need at least 48 hours before. Elena. His voice was gentle but firm. This is my world. If I show weakness now, we're dead. Both of us. He was right. I knew he was right. But watching him walk out of that panic room, bleeding and exhausted, to face men who wanted him dead felt like watching someone march toward execution. Dante paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mrs. Vitali, that was brave, what you did out there. The men are talking about it. You've earned respect today. Then I was alone in the underground bunker, surrounded by screens showing the damage from the attack. My hands still stained with my husband's blood, my lips still tingling from his kiss. And I realized that somewhere in the last 24 hours, this had stopped being a forced marriage and started being something far more dangerous. I started to care. Chapter 7. The 5 Families' Judgment. The sit-down was held in neutral territory, an old restaurant in Little Italy that had been closed for the evening, its windows covered, its doors guarded by men from all 5 families. Alessandro had insisted I come with him, saying my absence would seem like fear, like he was hiding his bride because the marriage had been a sham. So, I sat beside him at the large round table, wearing a black dress Lucia had selected. My hair pulled back, my face carefully made up to hide the exhaustion and fear. Alessandro's shoulder was bandaged beneath his tailored suit, and I knew he'd taken enough painkillers to function, but not enough to dull his edge. He needed to be sharp tonight. We both did. The other dons arrived one by one. Dominic Bonanno, the man whose family had attacked us, came with his nephew and consigliere. Robert Chen, head of the Chinese syndicate that controlled the ports. Viktor Morzov, the Russian Pakhan who ran the drug trade. And Antonio Vitali, Marco's father, who arrived last and took his seat with a smile that made my skin crawl. Gentlemen, Alessandro said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been born to command. We're here because the Bonanno family claims I broke the peace accord. I'm here to refute that claim and to demand restitution for the attack on my home and my wife. Dominic Bonanno leaned forward, his thick fingers drumming the table. Your home was attacked because you murdered my nephew, Leo. Don't pretend this was unprovoked. Leo Bonanno was killed by the Russians 3 weeks ago. I have proof. Alessandro nodded to Dante, who placed a tablet on the table, showing security footage of a warehouse where a young man, I assumed was Leo, was shot by men with distinctive tattoos, Russian prison markings. Viktor Morzov's expression didn't change. That footage could be faked. It's not. And you know it's not, Victor, because you ordered the hit after Leo tried to muscle in on your territory at the docks. Alessandro's voice was cold, precise. You used his death to frame me, hoping to start a war between the Italians while you consolidated power. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my expression neutral, even though my heart was racing. One wrong word here and we could all end up dead. Do you accuse me of this? Victor's accent thickened with anger. With no proof except your word. I have 3 witnesses who saw your men dump Leo's body at the docks. They're willing to testify. Testify to whom? The police? Victor laughed. We don't operate that way, Vitali. If you want to make accusations, back them with something real. Robert Chen, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. The question isn't just about Leo Bonanno's death. The question is about this marriage. His dark eyes fixed on me, assessing. It's convenient, isn't it? Right when tensions are high, right when questions are being asked about your leadership, suddenly you marry an outsider. Some think it's a sign of weakness. Others think it's a distraction. My marriage is my business, Alessandro said flatly. Everything you do is our business when it affects the balance of power. Antonio Vitali spoke for the first time, his voice smooth as oil. The family should have been consulted before you took such a significant step. Some of us feel you're making decisions without proper counsel. The Don approved it. The Don is dying. His judgment may not be what it once was. Alessandro's hand tightened on the table. The only sign of his anger. Careful, uncle. That's your father you're speaking about. I speak truth, and the truth is, nephew, that you've created chaos. Your hasty marriage, your conflicts with the Bonannos, your refusal to share power with the family. It all points to a man losing control. I felt Alessandro tense beside me, saw the careful control slipping. Before he could respond, before he could say something that would turn this meeting into violence, I spoke. Gentlemen, may I say something? Every eye turned to me. I felt their judgment, their dismissal, their curiosity. Good. Let them underestimate me. I understand that my marriage to Alessandro seems sudden, suspicious even, but I'm not some nobody he picked up to create a distraction. I met each man's eyes in turn, channeling every ounce of confidence I didn't feel. My grandfather was Lorenzo Russo of Calabria, a man all of you would have respected. A man who believed in honor, in family, in doing business the right way. Alessandro chose me because he's trying to build something better than what you've all built. And whether you like it or not, I'm here to help him do it. The silence was deafening. Then Dominic Bonanno started laughing. The sound harsh and mocking. The little girl has fire. I'll give you that, Vitali. But fire doesn't win wars. Blood does. And you've spilled mine. I haven't spilled anything. Victor has. And unless you want to look like a fool who was manipulated into attacking the wrong family, I suggest you redirect your anger where it belongs. Alessandro's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once. Support or warning, I couldn't tell. Victor Morozov stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't need to listen to these accusations. You have footage that proves nothing. Words from a wife who knows nothing about our world and desperation from a man who's losing his grip on power. He buttoned his jacket, signaling to his men. When you have real proof, Vitali, come find me. Until then, stay out of my way. He left, his men following, and the balance in the room shifted again. Robert Chen stood as well. I'm neutral in this. The Chinese have no stake in Italian or Russian conflicts. But Elena's right about one thing. You're all being played. Figure out by whom before you destroy each other. He nodded to me respectfully. Mrs. Vitali. Then he was gone too, leaving just the Italians. Dominic Bonanno stared at the tablet, still showing the footage of his nephew's death. When he looked up, his face was carved from stone. If what you say is true, if Victor killed my Leo, then you and I have no quarrel. But if I find out you're lying, if this is some scheme to cover your own crimes, I'll burn your world to the ground. Your mansion, your businesses, your wife. He looked at me. Everything. Understood, Alessandro said calmly. And when you confirm what I've told you, I expect a formal apology and restitution for the damage to my property and the loss of my men. Dominic nodded once, then left with his nephew, which left only Antonio and Marco, still seated across from us, matching predatory smiles on their faces. Well done, nephew, Antonio said. You've turned Victor into your enemy and made a tentative peace with the Bonannos. Very clever. But you've exposed yourself in the process. Now, everyone knows your marriage is a gambit, a play for legitimacy and power, and gambits can fail. Is that a threat, uncle? It's an observation. The family can't afford your experiments in honor and reform. We've survived for generations by being ruthless, by taking what we want, by crushing anyone who opposes us. Your grandfather's dying wish doesn't change that reality. Alejandro stood, and despite his injury, despite the exhaustion I could see in every line of his body, he radiated power. The meeting is over. Leave my territory. Antonio rose smoothly. Think about what I've said, Alessandro, before your idealism gets everyone killed. When they were finally gone, when it was just Alejandro and me and his guards, he sagged against the table, his face gray. We need to get you home, I said urgently. In a minute. He looked at me and there was something fierce and grateful in his eyes. You were incredible. The way you spoke to them, the way you invoked your grandfather's name, you just earned respect that would have taken years to build. I was terrified. I know. So was I. He managed to smile. We make a good team. Alejandro. The first shot came through the covered window, shattering glass and wood. Then another. Then a barrage. Down. Dante roared, throwing himself over us as the restaurant erupted into chaos. And I realized that Antonio's threat hadn't been a threat at all. It had been a countdown to war. If I discover that you're being dishonest with me, if this whole thing turns out to be some kind of elaborate ploy to conceal your own misdeeds, I will not hesitate to obliterate everything you hold dear. Your opulent mansion, your sprawling business empire, your wife. He paused, his gaze locking with mine. Everything you've ever worked for. Understood perfectly, Alessandro responded, his voice betraying no emotion. And when you've had the chance to verify the truth of what I've shared with you, I fully expect a formal apology delivered with all due haste, as well as complete restitution for the damage inflicted upon my property and the tragic loss of my men. Dominic offered a single, curt nod, before departing with his nephew in tow, leaving Antonio and Marco the only remaining figures seated across from us, each sporting matching predatory grins plastered across their faces. Well done, nephew, Antonio remarked, a hint of sardonic amusement lacing his tone. You've skillfully managed to transform Victor into a sworn enemy, while simultaneously forging a tentative peace with the Bananos. Quite clever, I must admit. However, you've inadvertently exposed yourself in the process. Now, the entire family is aware that your marriage is nothing more than a calculated gambit, a blatant power play designed to bolster your legitimacy. And as you well know, gambits are always susceptible to failure. Is that supposed to be a threat, uncle? I challenged, my voice tight with controlled anger. Simply an observation, my dear boy. Antonio countered smoothly. The family can scarcely afford your idealistic experiments in honor and reform. We've managed to survive for generations by embracing ruthlessness, by seizing whatever we desire, and by crushing any and all who dare to oppose us. Your grandfather's dying wish holds no power to alter that fundamental reality. Alejandro rose to his full height, and despite the visible signs of his recent injuries and the unmistakable exhaustion etched into every line of his body, he still managed to radiate an aura of undeniable power. The meeting is over, he declared, his voice brooking no argument. Leave my territory immediately. Antonio, unfazed by the dismissal, rose gracefully to his feet. Think carefully about what I've said, Alessandro, he urged, his eyes glinting with warning, before your naive idealism gets everyone around you killed. Once they had finally departed, leaving only Alejandro, myself, and his loyal guards remaining, Alejandro visibly deflated, his body slumping against the table as his face drained of all color. We need to get you back home immediately, I insisted, my voice filled with urgency. Just give me a minute, he replied, his gaze locking with mine, and I detected a flicker of fierce gratitude within the depths of his eyes. You were absolutely incredible back there. The way you addressed them, the skillful manner in which you invoked your grandfather's name, you earned a level of respect in that room that would normally take years to cultivate. I was terrified. I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. I know exactly how you felt. So was I. A faint smile flickered across his lips. We make one hell of a team, you and I. Suddenly, without warning, the first gunshot shattered the illusion of safety, tearing through the covered window and sending shards of glass and splinters of wood flying through the air. Then came another, followed by a veritable barrage of gunfire. "Down!" Dante roared, instinctively throwing himself over us both as the once elegant restaurant descended into complete and utter chaos. And in that moment, I realized with chilling certainty that Antonio's earlier threat had been no idle warning, but rather the opening salvo in a full-scale war. Chapter 8. The Choice Between Worlds. We made it back to the estate by some miracle. Dante driving like a demon while Alejandro bled beside me in the back seat. His wound reopened, his breathing labored. The attack at the restaurant had been coordinated. Professional. Someone had known exactly when and where we'd be vulnerable. Someone inside Alejandro Vunk's organization had betrayed us. The mansion had been transformed into a fortress. Armed guards patrolled every inch of the grounds. Steel shutters covered the windows. The beauty I'd first seen had been replaced by brutal pragmatism. This was no longer a home. It was a military base preparing for siege. I worked on Alejandro's shoulder in his private study. The one room he'd claimed was safe with Dante and 2 other guards posted at the door. The wound was worse this time. I needed to stitch it. Needed proper surgical equipment. Needed him to stop being so goddamn stubborn about going to a hospital. "Hold still," I ordered, threading the needle with hands that shook only slightly. "You've done this before. I've assisted in the ER. Never on I caught myself. Never on someone I care about." His eyes found mine dark and intense. "Say that again. Hold still." The other part. I focused on the first stitch, watching the needle pierce his skin. "You know what I said? I want to hear it again." His good hand caught my wrist, gentle but insistent. "Please, I care about you." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "I don't want to. I shouldn't. You kidnapped me, forced me into this marriage, dragged me into your nightmare world, but I care about you anyway, and I'm furious about it." His laugh was pained, but genuine. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. You need better romance in your life. I need you in my life. That's enough." I finished the stitches in silence, bandaged his shoulder, gave him antibiotics and more painkillers than he wanted. When I was done, he caught my hand again. "Elena, you need to leave tonight." My heart stopped. "What?" "I've made arrangements. Dante will take you to a safe house in Canada. New identity, new life, enough money to finish school and start over. You'll be free." "You're trying to get rid of me." "I'm trying to keep you alive." He pulled me closer, his forehead touching mine. "Victor knows about you now. So does Antonio. They'll use you to get to me. The only way you're safe is if you disappear. And what happens to you? I survive. Or I don't. But at least you won't be caught in the crossfire." I pulled back, anger flooding through me. "You think I'm that weak, that fragile? I ran into gunfire to save you. I spoke up at that meeting. I'm not some victim who needs rescuing Alejandro. I know that, but this isn't about strength. It's about," he stopped, his jaw working. "It's about the fact that if something happens to you because of me, I won't survive it. Not mentally, not emotionally. I'll become the monster everyone thinks I am. Then don't let anything happen to me. Keep me safe the way you promised." "I can't guarantee that. Not anymore. Someone in my organization is feeding information to my enemies. Until I find out who, everyone's at risk, especially you." I thought about the life he was offering. Escape, freedom, a chance to go back to being just Elena Russo, nursing student. Nobody special. A week ago, I would have taken it without hesitation. But that was before I'd seen him bleed. Before I'd kissed him in a panic room. Before I'd realized that the man everyone feared was also the man who'd given me more honest respect in 3 days than most people had given me in a lifetime. "I'm staying," I said. "Elena, I'm staying, and you can't make me leave. You promised me freedom when this was over, and I'll hold you to that. But right now, this marriage is keeping both of us alive. The moment I leave, Antonio has grounds to question your judgment. The other families will see it as weakness, and whoever's betraying you will know they've won. You're too smart for your own good. You married a nursing student. What did you expect? This time his smile was real, warm despite everything. I expected to make a decision to honor a dying man and ended up with a partner instead. Partners? I like that better than prisoner. You're still technically a prisoner. Then I'm the weirdest Stockholm Syndrome case in history. He laughed, then winced at the pain the movement caused. I eased him back into his chair, checking his pulse, his pupil response, all the clinical signs that kept me from thinking about what I just committed to. Rest, I ordered. I'll stay here and make sure you don't do anything stupid like try to coordinate a war while recovering from major trauma. Bossy, he murmured, his eyes already closing. You like it. Unfortunately, I do. I watched him drift off, his face finally relaxing into sleep, and wondered when exactly I'd stopped being his captive and started being his wife in truth. The answer came 3 hours later when Dante burst into the study, his face grim. Mrs. Vitali, we have a problem. It's the dawn. He's asking for both of you. The doctors say he's fading fast, maybe hours. He wants to see you before he dies. I looked at Alessandro, still asleep in the chair, his body finally getting the rest it desperately needed. Waking him now could undo all the healing. But this was his grandfather, the man whose dying wish had brought us together. I'll wake him, I said quietly, because that's what partners did. They shared the hard moments, the painful choices, the weight of a world built on blood and honor and impossible love, even when it might destroy them both. We miraculously managed to escape and make our way back to the estate, though I'm still not quite sure how. Dante was driving like a bat out of hell, while Alessandro, his lifeblood seeping into the plush leather of the back seat, was growing weaker by the minute, and I was trying desperately to keep him alive. The wound he had sustained earlier had ripped open again, and his breathing was becoming increasingly shallow and labored. It was clear as day that the attack at the restaurant had been meticulously planned and flawlessly executed by seasoned professionals. Someone had known precisely when and where we would be at our most vulnerable. That realization left me with a sickening feeling. Someone within Alessandro's own inner circle, someone he trusted implicitly, had betrayed us. The mansion, once a symbol of opulent elegance, had been swiftly transformed into an impenetrable fortress. Heavily armed guards patrolled every inch of the manicured grounds, their eyes scanning for any sign of threat. Steel shutters had been hastily installed over the windows, turning the once inviting facade into a cold, unyielding barrier. The breathtaking beauty that had initially captivated me had been replaced by an air of brutal pragmatism, of grim determination. This was no longer a home. It was a military base bracing for a prolonged siege. I found myself tending to Alessandro's shoulder in his private study, the one room within the entire estate that he still seemed to consider safe. Dante and 2 other trusted guards stood watch outside the door, their presence a silent reassurance. The wound, I could see with growing alarm, was significantly worse this time around. I needed to stitch it closed properly, but that would require proper surgical equipment, the kind that wasn't readily available. And I desperately needed him to stop being so goddamn stubborn about going to a real hospital, where he could receive the specialized care he so desperately needed. Hold perfectly still, I ordered, my voice firm despite the fact that my hands were shaking ever so slightly as I threaded the needle. You've been through this before. I've assisted in the ER countless times. I know what I'm doing. I caught myself before I could finish the sentence. Never on someone I care about. His dark eyes locked with mine, his gaze intense and unwavering. Say that again, he commanded, his voice low and husky. Hold still, I repeated, my voice regaining its professional edge. The other part, he insisted. His eyes fixed on mine as I focused all my attention on making the first stitch, carefully watching the needle pierce his skin. You know exactly what you said. I want to hear it again. His uninjured hand reached out and gently but firmly closed around my wrist, stopping me in my tracks. Please, Elena, he urged. I care about you. Tell me you care about me too. The words burst out of me with an unexpected force, almost tinged with anger. I don't want to, I protested. my voice rising in pitch. I shouldn't. You kidnapped me, forced me into this ridiculous marriage, dragged me headfirst into your insane, dangerous world, but despite all that, I care about you anyway, and frankly, I'm absolutely furious about it. A pained, but undeniably genuine laugh escaped his lips. That's the most romantic damn thing anyone has ever said to me in my entire life, he confessed, his eyes twinkling with amusement. You need to find yourself some better romance, Elena. I need you in my life, Alejandro, I countered softly. That's enough for now, I said, trying to regain some semblance of control. I finished stitching the wound in silence, carefully bandaging his shoulder before administering antibiotics and more painkillers than he probably wanted to take. Once I was finished, he reached out and clasped my hand once more, his touch surprisingly gentle. Elena, he said, his voice serious, you need to leave tonight. My heart skipped a beat, then seemed to stop altogether. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I've already made all the necessary arrangements, he explained, his grip tightening on my hand. Dante will personally escort you to a secure safe house in Canada. You'll be given a new identity, a fresh start, and enough money to finish your schooling and start your life over. You'll be completely free from all of this, Elena. You're trying to get rid of me, I accused, my voice rising in indignation. I'm trying to keep you alive, Elena, he countered, his voice laced with desperation. He reached out and pulled me closer, gently resting his forehead against mine. Victor knows about you now, he explained, his voice low and urgent. So does Antonio. They will not hesitate to use you as leverage against me, to get to me through you. The only guaranteed way, to ensure your safety is for you to disappear completely, to vanish without a trace. And what about you, Alejandro? What happens to you in all of this? I demanded, pulling away slightly so I could look him in the eye. I'll survive, he stated, his voice firm, though I could see the uncertainty lurking beneath the surface. Or I won't. But either way, at least you won't be caught in the crossfire. I yanked my hand away from his, a surge of anger flooding through me, coursing through my veins. Do you really think I'm that weak, that fragile, that incapable? I challenged, my voice laced with disbelief. I ran headfirst into a hail of gunfire to save your life. I spoke my mind at that meeting, knowing full well what the consequences might be. I am not some helpless victim who needs rescuing, Alejandro. I know that, Elena, he said, his voice softening slightly. But this isn't about strength or weakness. It's about... He trailed off, his jaw working as he struggled to find the right words. It's about the simple, undeniable fact that if something terrible happens to you because of me, I won't be able to survive it. Not mentally, not emotionally. I'll become the monster that everyone already believes me to be. Then don't let anything happen to me, Alejandro. I pleaded, my voice laced with desperation. Keep me safe, the way you promised you would. I can't guarantee that, Elena, he confessed, his voice tinged with regret. Not anymore. There is someone within my own organization, someone I trusted implicitly, who is feeding sensitive information to my enemies. And until I can manage to find out who that traitor is, everyone, especially you, is at risk. I found myself considering the life he was offering me, the escape hatch he was so desperately trying to force me through. Escape, freedom, a golden opportunity to return to my former life as Elena Russo, the unassuming nursing student with no special connections or hidden agendas. Only a week ago, I would have accepted that offer without a moment's hesitation, would have run as far and as fast as my legs could carry me. But that was before I had witnessed him bleeding, broken, and vulnerable. Before I had kissed him in that suffocating panic room, clinging to each other for dear life. Before I had finally come to the startling realization that the man everyone else feared, the ruthless Mafia boss they whispered about in hushed tones, was also the man who had shown me more genuine, heartfelt respect in the span of 3 short days than most people had shown me in my entire life. I'm staying, Alejandro, I declared, my voice firm and resolute. I am staying right here, and you can't make me leave no matter how hard you try. You promised me freedom when all of this was over, and I fully intend to hold you to that promise. But right now, at this very moment, this marriage, this fragile alliance, is what's keeping both of us alive. The second I leave, Antonio will have all the ammunition he needs to openly question your judgment, to undermine your authority. The other families will interpret my departure as a sign of weakness, an open invitation to attack. And whoever is betraying you from within will know that they've effectively won. You're far too smart for your own damn good, Elena, he muttered, shaking his head in exasperation. You're the one who chose to marry a nursing student, Alejandro. I retorted, my lips twitching into a wry smile. What exactly did you expect? This time, a genuine smile bloomed on his face, radiating warmth despite the grim circumstances. I initially expected to simply make a dutiful decision to honor a dying man's final wish, he admitted, his eyes softening as he gazed at me. But instead, I ended up with a true partner, someone who stands by my side no matter what. Partners? I repeated, savoring the sound of the word. I definitely like that a whole lot better than prisoner. You're still technically a prisoner, Elena, he pointed out, a teasing glint in his eyes. Well then, I must be the weirdest, most screwed-up case of Stockholm Syndrome in the entire history of the world. I quipped, unable to suppress a laugh. He chuckled in response, but then immediately winced in pain, the sudden movement clearly aggravating his injured shoulder. I gently eased him back against the cushions of his chair, instinctively checking his pulse, his pupil response, focusing on all the clinical signs that kept me from dwelling on the enormity of what I had just committed myself to. Rest, Alejandro, I ordered, my voice firm. I'm going to stay right here and make absolutely certain that you don't do anything even remotely stupid, like trying to coordinate a war while you're still recovering from major trauma. Bossy, he murmured, his eyelids already beginning to droop shut. You like it, don't you? I teased, a hint of a smile playing on my lips. Unfortunately, I do, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper before he finally succumbed to the overwhelming exhaustion and drifted off to sleep. I watched him for a long while, his face finally relaxing in slumber, and I found myself wondering when exactly I had stopped being his captive and started becoming his wife in truth, a genuine partner in every sense of the word. The answer came crashing down around me a mere 3 hours later, when Dante burst into the study, his face etched with grim urgency. Mrs. Vitali, he announced, his voice low and somber. We have a problem. It's the Don. He's asking for both of you. The doctors are saying that he's fading fast, that he may only have a few hours left. He wants to see you both before he dies. I glanced over at Alessandro, who was still sound asleep in the chair, his body finally getting the rest it so desperately needed. Waking him now, I knew, could potentially undo all the healing he had managed to achieve in the past few hours. But this was his grandfather, the man whose dying wish had brought us together in the first place. How could we deny him this final request? I'll wake him, I said quietly, my voice resolute, because that's what partners did, didn't they? They shared the hard moments, the painful choices, the crushing weight of a world built on blood and honor and impossible love, even when it threatened to destroy them both. Chapter 9. The Don's Final Gift. The old Don's bedroom smelled of sickness and expensive cologne, a combination that made my stomach turn. He lay in a massive 4-poster bed, tubes and monitors surrounding him, a private medical team standing by with the grim efficiency of people who knew death was coming. Alejandro stood at his grandfather's bedside holding the old man's hand, his face carved from stone. I stayed back, giving them this moment, this goodbye between the leader who'd built an empire and the grandson who'd inherited its weight. Alessandro, the Don whispered, his voice paper-thin. You brought her. Of course, Nano. The old man's eyes found me, still sharp despite the body's failure. He beckoned me closer with a trembling hand. Elena, come. Let me see Lorenzo's granddaughter. I approached the bed, taking his other hand, feeling how fragile it was. Bones and skin, all the power gone. You've caused quite a stir in my grandson's life, he said with a weak smile. I didn't mean to, sir. Of course you didn't. That's what makes it perfect. He looked between us, and something knowing gleamed in his eyes. You love him already. I can see it. My breath caught. I don't deny it. I'm dying. And the dying see truth that the living try to hide. He squeezed my hand gently. Alejandro, you love her too. Don't shake your head, boy. I know you. You're your father's son. You love completely or not at all. Alessandro Bunk? Ree's jaw tightened. But he didn't argue. I thought I was giving you an anchor, the Dawn continued. A respectable wife to legitimize your leadership, to honor the old ways. But I see now I gave you something more dangerous. I gave you something to lose. No, don't. Let me finish. He coughed and one of the doctors moved forward, but he waved them away impatiently. In this world, love is weakness. It gives enemies a target, a weapon to use against you, but it's also strength. It makes you fight harder, think clearer, want more than just survival. He reached beneath his pillow and pulled out an envelope yellowed with age. This is for you both, my will, but also something else. Information I've kept hidden for 30 years. Information about who really killed your father, Alessandro. Alejandro went rigid. All this time you knew. I suspected. Now I'm certain. The proof is in that envelope along with instructions for how to use it. The Dawn's voice was fading, each word an effort. But hear me, grandson. If you pursue this revenge, it will cost you everything. The family will fracture. Allies will become enemies. And Elena, his eyes found mine. You will be tested in ways that will break most people. Then why give us this? I asked. Why not let it die with you? Because he deserves to know the truth. And because the choice should be his revenge or peace, blood or future, I've lived for revenge my whole life. Watched it consume good men and make monsters of boys. I want better for Alessandro, for both of you. He pressed the envelope into Alessandro Unk's hand, then pulled both of our hands together, covering them with his own trembling grasp. Promise me something. Promise me that whatever you choose it together. As husband and wife, as partners, as whatever you are to each other. This world will try to tear you apart. Don't let it. Promise. No, Alessandro said, his voice thick. The Dawn looked at me expectantly. I promise, I whispered. Good. He settled back against his pillows, a look of peace settling over his features. Now leave me. I'm tired and I want to dream of your grandmother before I go to meet her. We left quietly, the envelope heavy in Alejandro Unk's hand. In the hallway he stopped, staring at it like it might explode. Do you want to open it now? I asked. I don't know if I want to open it at all. He looked at me and I saw fear there. Real raw fear. What if it's Antonio? What if my own uncle killed my father? Then you'll know and you'll decide what to do with that knowledge together. Together. We went back to his study. Our study now, I realized Dante was dismissed. The guards were told to give us privacy. It was just Alejandro and me and the truth waiting in a yellowed envelope. He opened it slowly, carefully, pulling out papers covered in his grandfather's spidery handwriting. As he read, I watched his face go through a series of changes. Shock, grief, rage, and finally something that looked like devastation. It was Victor, he said finally, his voice hollow. My father refused to work with the Russians, refused to let them expand into our territory. So Victor had him killed and made it look like an accident. The car bomb was his signature. He'd used it before in Moscow. Can you prove it? My grandfather could. He's documented everything. Payments to the bomber, intercepted communications, witness statements. It's all here. Enough to bring before the commission. Enough to get every family to sanction Victor's death. But he looked up at me, and I saw the weight of the choice pressing down on him. But if I pursue this, Victor will fight back. He'll claim I'm using a dead man's paranoid notes to start a war. He'll ally with whoever offers him protection, probably Antonio. The city will burn. Hundreds will die, and at the end of it, even if I win, I'll be exactly what my grandfather feared. A man consumed by revenge, building my empire on bodies and blood. I moved closer, taking the papers from his shaking hands, setting them aside. Then I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. What do you want, Alessandro? Not what your grandfather wanted. Not what the family expects. What do you want? He was quiet for a long time, his hands coming up to cover mine. I want justice for my father, but more than that, he stopped. Something breaking in his expression. More than that, I want to build something with you. Something that's not just survival and violence and revenge. I want what my grandfather said. A future, not just a blood debt. Then that's what we choose. It's not that simple. Victor needs to pay for what he did. Then we find another way. We're smart, both of us. There has to be a path between blind vengeance and letting him walk away unpunished. You're asking me to be better than I am. No. I pulled him closer, resting my forehead against his. I'm asking you to be who you already are beneath all the armor and fear. The man who offered me freedom. The man who protected me from Marco. The man who's been trying so hard to be better than what this world demands. His arms came around me, careful of his injured shoulder. And he held me like I was the only solid thing in a tilting world. I don't deserve you, he murmured into my hair. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Elena Vitali, my wife, my partner, my what? My salvation, he finished. If such a thing exists for men like me. I pulled back just enough to kiss him, pouring every complicated feeling of the past few days into it. Fear and anger and hope and something that felt dangerously close to love. He kissed me back with matching intensity. His good hand tangling in my hair, his breath coming fast. When we broke apart, both of us breathing hard, I said the thing I'd been holding back since the panic room. I'm in love with you. It's insane and probably stupid and definitely too fast. But it's true. And I need you to know that before we decide what to do about Victor, before we face whatever comes next. Alessandro stared at me like I just performed a miracle. Say it again. I love you again. I love you, you stubborn, impossible, beautiful Mafia boss. He laughed, the sound almost giddy with relief. I love you too. I've been in love with you since you ran into gunfire to save me. Maybe before that, maybe since you stood in that restaurant and kept your dignity while Vivian tried to destroy you. I don't know when it started. I just know I can't imagine my life without you in it. Then we face this together. All of it. Victor, Antonio, the future, everything. Together, he agreed. The Dawn's bedroom was thick with the cloying aroma of illness mingled with the overpowering scent of expensive cologne. A combination that churned my stomach. He lay propped up in a massive, ornate four-poster bed, surrounded by a tangle of tubes and blinking monitors. A team of private medical professionals stood silently by, their expressions betraying the grim efficiency of those who were intimately familiar with the impending arrival of death. Alessandro stood vigil at his grandfather's bedside, gently clasping the old man's hand in his own. His face was an impassive mask, carefully concealing the emotions raging beneath the surface. I lingered in the doorway, wanting to give them this final moment of privacy. This last goodbye between the man who had built an empire and the grandson who was now destined to inherit its immense weight. Alessandro, the Dawn whispered, his voice thin and reedy, like the rustling of dry leaves. You brought her. Of course, Nano. Alessandro replied softly, his voice thick with emotion. The old man's eyes, though dimmed by the ravages of illness, found me across the room, still retaining a spark of their former sharpness. He beckoned me closer with a frail, trembling hand. Elena, come here, child. Let me get a good look at Lorenzo's granddaughter. I approached the bed slowly, reverently, and took his other hand in mine, feeling the fragility of his bones beneath my fingertips. It was hard to believe that this frail, weakened shell of a man had once wielded such incredible power. You've certainly caused quite a stir in my grandson's life, haven't you? He said, his lips curving into a weak smile. I didn't mean to, sir, I replied, my voice barely audible. Of course you didn't, he chuckled softly. That's precisely what makes it so perfect. He shifted his gaze between us, and a knowing glint flickered in his eyes. You love him already, don't you? I can see it plain as day. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively averted my gaze. There was no point in denying the truth, not now. I won't deny it, I confessed, my voice soft. I know that I'm dying, Elena, he said, his grip tightening slightly on my hand. And the dying have a clarity of vision that the living often try desperately to hide from themselves. He squeezed my hand gently. Alejandro, you love her too, don't you? Don't shake your head at me, boy. I know you better than anyone else in this world. You're your father's son, through and through. You love completely, wholeheartedly, or not at all. Alejandro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he didn't offer any argument. I initially thought I was simply giving you an anchor, the Don continued, his voice growing weaker with each passing word. A respectable wife to legitimize your leadership, to uphold the traditions of the old ways. But I see now that I've given you something far more dangerous, something infinitely more precious. I've given you something to lose. No, don't talk like that, Nano, Alejandro protested, his voice laced with worry. No, hush, Alejandro, let me finish, the Don insisted, waving aside the doctor who stepped forward to assist him after a fit of coughing racked his frail body. In this world, love is often seen as a weakness. It gives your enemies a target, a weapon to use against you. But it's also a source of incredible strength. It makes you fight harder, think clearer, want more than just mere survival. He reached beneath his pillow with a trembling hand and pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed and brittle with age. This is for you both, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It's my last will and testament, of course, but it's also something else entirely. It's information that I've kept hidden for over 30 years. A secret that I thought would die with me. It's information about who was truly responsible for your father's death. Alessandro. Alejandro went rigid, his body tensing with shock and disbelief. You knew? He demanded, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. All this time, you knew who murdered my father? I suspected. The Don admitted, his gaze unwavering. Now, I'm absolutely certain. The irrefutable proof is contained within that envelope, along with detailed instructions on how to use it to your advantage. The Don's voice was fading rapidly, each word requiring an enormous effort. But hear me now, grandson, he pleaded, his eyes searching Alejandro's. If you choose to pursue this path of revenge, it will come at a terrible cost. It will cost you everything you hold dear. The family will fracture, old alliances will crumble, and trusted allies will become bitter enemies. He turned his gaze towards me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and concern. And you, Elena, will be tested in ways that would break most people. Then why give us this, sir? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Why not let this secret die with you? Because Alessandro deserves to know the truth, no matter how painful it may be. The Don replied, a week prior, I'd been a waitress, dreaming of a simple life. Now, I was the wife of Chicago's most powerful crime lord, residing in a mansion erected on blood money, and somehow, impossibly, I was happy. I have a condition, I stated. Another one. You promised me freedom when this was over. When your grandfather died and we could safely end the marriage. His face became carefully blank. Yes, I did. I want to renegotiate that condition. Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. Renegotiate how? I don't want freedom from you. I want freedom with you. I want to choose this marriage every single day. Not because I'm trapped, but because I want to be here with you, building whatever this is we're creating. Elena, let me finish. He reached out, his voice softening. I know what your world is now. I know the danger, the violence, the impossible choices that come with it. I know I'll see things that will haunt me for the rest of my life. That loving you means living with a knot of fear in my stomach every time you walk out that door. But I also know that you're worth it. That what we have, this bond between us, is worth fighting for, worth enduring anything. He cupped my face with both hands, his thumbs gently stroking my cheeks, his expression raw with unfiltered emotion. Are you sure about this, Elena? Because once you make this choice, once you truly become a part of this world, there's no going back. You'll be a target for my enemies. You'll carry the weight of the Vitali name. You'll I'll have you, I interrupted, my voice firm. And you'll have me. That's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. He kissed me then, deep and searching, as if trying to find confirmation in the depths of my soul. And I tasted promise in that kiss. A future we'd build together, brick by careful brick, a testament to our love and commitment. When we broke apart, I was breathless but absolutely certain. So I said, trying for lightness despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me, what does one do as the wife of a mafia boss besides occasional gunfights and diplomatic negotiations with other crime families? Alejandro laughed, the sound warm and genuinely amused. Well, you could start by keeping me from making stupid decisions driven by ego and pride. That would be a valuable contribution. I think I can manage that. And you could help me figure out what to do about the legitimate businesses my grandfather built alongside the illegal ones. He always wanted the family to go straight eventually. Maybe we can start that process, finally fulfilling his vision. Laundering the family fortune into respectability? Something like that? Exactly. Your grandfather refused to be corrupted, even within this world. Maybe Lorenzo Russo's granddaughter can help uncorrupt what's been built, cleanse the tainted legacy. It was a beautiful dream, almost too good to be true. Impossible, probably, but beautiful nonetheless. The idea that love could redeem, that two people could deliberately choose a different path than the one they'd been forced onto by fate and circumstance. There's one more thing, Alessandro said, his tone suddenly serious. I need to tell you something about Marco and Antonio. My stomach tightened into a knot. What about them? They're the ones who leaked our location to the Bonos, the ones who told them about the sit-down at the restaurant. I have proof now. Dante found the communications about 2 hours ago. What are you going to do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I'm going to offer them the same choice my grandfather offered me. Exile or death. A chance to walk away, to start fresh somewhere else, or face the consequences of their betrayal. He met my eyes, his gaze unwavering. But I wanted to tell you first, to give you a chance to what? Object? Ask you to show mercy to the men who tried to have us killed? I shook my head slowly. I'm not that naive, Alessandro. I know how this world works now. I know what betrayal costs. I know the stakes. You're not angry that I'm giving them a choice instead of just eliminating them? No. I'm proud of you, I said honestly, meaning every word. A week ago, you would have just killed them without hesitation. Now you're offering mercy you don't have to give. That's growth, Alessandro. That's the man you're becoming, the man I love. He pulled me against him, holding me like I was precious, like I was the answer to questions he'd been asking his whole life. How did I get this lucky? He murmured into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't get lucky. You made a choice to be better, to rise above the darkness. And the universe rewarded you with a stubborn nursing student who refuses to let you backslide. Best decision I ever made, he said, his voice muffled against my hair. Marrying you, saying yes when my grandfather suggested it. Everything else has just been inevitability. A beautiful, chaotic destiny unfolding. We sat there as the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of gold and crimson. And I thought about the strange, winding path that had brought me here. A spilled glass of wine, a cruel woman's tantrum, a dangerous man's quiet observation, a dying dawn's desperate wish. All of it leading to this moment, this choice, this love that shouldn't exist but did anyway, defying all logic and reason. I have something for you, Alejandro said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, different from the one that had held his mother's ring. I bought this yesterday, before everything with the commission, before my grandfather died. I wanted you to have it regardless of what you decided about staying. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a single pendant, a small compass rose, beautifully detailed. So you always know which way is home, he said quietly, his voice filled with tenderness. No matter where this life takes you, no matter what dangers we face, you can always find your way back to me, back to us. I didn't trust myself to speak, choked up with emotion. So, I just turned around, letting him fasten the necklace around my neck. The weight of it settled against my chest, warm and solid, a tangible promise made in gold. "Thank you," I finally managed, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life, for seeing something worth saving in a man who thought he was beyond redemption. You were never beyond redemption, Alejandro. You were just waiting for someone to see you clearly, to see past the darkness and into the heart of who you truly are. And you do see me clearly, don't you?" "I do. I see a man trying to honor his family while building something better, something lasting. I see someone who offers mercy when revenge would be so much easier. I see my husband, the man I love more than I thought possible." I turned back to face him, my heart overflowing. "I see my future." He kissed me again. And this time it was different. Not desperate or urgent, but certain, filled with a quiet confidence. The kiss of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided to stay, to commit, to build a life together, come what may. When we finally pulled apart, Alessandro rested his forehead against mine. His eyes filled with a mixture of love and concern. "I can't promise you it will be easy," he said, his voice low and serious. "I can't promise we won't face more danger, more impossible choices. This world doesn't forgive weakness, and loving each other is the greatest weakness we could possibly have. Then we'll be weak together," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "And somehow we'll make that our strength together. Always." Outside, the sun finished setting, plunging the room into twilight. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the city Chicago, with all its beauty and danger, its promise and its threat. The city that had brought me from waitress to wife, from nobody to someone who mattered in ways I never could have expected. Alejandro stood, offering me his hand. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." I took his hand, my husband's hand, and let him lead me through the mansion to a room I'd never seen before. It was on the 3rd floor, facing east, with floor-to-ceiling windows that would catch the sunrise. "I had them set this up today," he said, opening the door and gesturing for me to enter. Inside was a study, but not like his formal, imposing one. This one felt warm and inviting. Medical textbooks lined the shelves. A desk held my laptop, already set up and ready for use. Comfortable chairs beckoned, and the lighting was perfect for studying. In the corner was a state-of-the-art anatomy model, and on the walls were beautiful anatomical drawings, each one carefully chosen. "Your space?" Alejandro said, his voice full of pride and affection. "For studying, for planning your future at the hospital, for remembering that you're more than just my wife. You're Elena Russo Vitali, who's going to be an incredible nurse and save lives and make a difference in this city." I walked into the room, running my fingers over the spines of the books, touching the smooth surface of the desk, absorbing the evidence of his faith in me, his belief in my dreams. He'd given me this, a space to be myself, to pursue my passions, when he could have just offered me comfort and wealth, a life of leisure and ease. Instead, he'd given me purpose, identity, a future beyond the confines of his world, a way to contribute and to be me. "Thank you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Happy tears, grateful tears, tears for everything we'd survived and everything we were becoming. "Don't thank me," he said, stepping closer and gently wiping away the tears with his thumbs. "Just promise me you'll use it, that you'll finish school and become the nurse you dreamed of being, that you won't let my world consume all of who you are, all of what makes you Elena." "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "If you promise not to let your world consume all of who you could be, deal." We stood there in my new study, holding each other close as the last light faded and the stars began to appear over Chicago, twinkling like diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth. Two people who shouldn't work, who shouldn't have found each other, who by all rights should have destroyed each other. Instead, we'd saved each other, pulling each other back from the brink. "I love you, Elena," Alessandro said into the darkness, his voice low and filled with emotion. "I love you too," I replied, my voice equally soft. "Unto death and beyond." That's a very dramatic declaration, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I married a mafia boss, I retorted, smiling. I'm allowed to be dramatic. Comes with the territory. His laugh echoed through the empty room, warm and real and free of the weight he usually carried. And in that moment, I knew we'd be okay. Not perfect, not without struggle or danger or heartbreak, but okay. Together. Because love in the darkness, love built on honesty and choice and partnership, was stronger than any empire built on fear. And we would prove it one day at a time for as long as we both drew breath. Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood in the emergency room of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, my scrubs splattered with blood, my hair falling out of its ponytail, my body exhausted from a 12-hour shift. But I was smiling, a genuine, heartfelt smile, because I just saved a life. A teenage boy with a gunshot wound. Touch and go for 2 long, agonizing hours. But we'd pulled him through. I'd been the one to spot the internal bleeding, the one whose quick thinking and decisive action had prevented disaster. I was a nurse now. I'd passed my boards 2 months ago, and Alejandro had thrown a party that rivaled our wedding. A lavish celebration that shut down half the Gold Coast. The entire medical staff at Northwestern had no idea their newest RN was married to one of the most powerful men in the city. To them, I was just Elena Vitali, hardworking, dedicated, the woman who volunteered for the worst shifts and never complained. My phone buzzed with a text. How was your shift? I saved a life. Feels good. My hero. Dante is out front whenever you're ready. Give me 20 minutes. Need to debrief with the attending. Take your time. I'm making dinner. A smile tugged at my lips. Alejandro had discovered he enjoyed cooking, much to his own surprise, and it gave him something to do with his hands when he was stressed. A way to focus his energy on something that created rather than destroyed. He was actually pretty good at it, though he'd never admit it to anyone but me. Life had settled into a strange but wonderful routine. I worked at the hospital 3 days a week, throwing myself into the chaos and the challenges, and Alejandro ran his empire, but with significant changes. Legitimate businesses were expanding, flourishing under his guidance. Illegal operations were slowly being phased out, replaced by legitimate ventures. And he'd started working with community organizations to provide alternatives to crime for young men in the neighborhoods he controlled, offering them hope and opportunity where before there had only been despair. It was slow work, generational work, but it was progress. Each small victory a testament to our commitment. Victor had vanished into Europe, last seen in Prague, still bitter and resentful, but smart enough to stay away, knowing that his best chance of survival was to disappear. Antonio and Marco had chosen exile over death, relocating to Miami where they were someone else's problem, their betrayal earning them a permanent banishment from Chicago. The Vitali family was healing, rebuilding under Alejandro's leadership, and we were happy. Impossibly, against all odds, happy. I finished my notes, changed out of my blood-stained scrubs, and headed outside where Dante waited patiently with the car, the city lights reflecting off the polished black metal. He greeted me with a nod of respect, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between us. We'd become friends of a sort, a strange and unlikely friendship forged in the crucible of shared experiences. The man who'd once dragged me from my apartment, a virtual prisoner, was now one of my staunchest protectors. The drive home took 30 minutes through the evening traffic, the city a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows. Home. I called it that now without irony, without hesitation. The mansion was home, not because of its grandeur or its opulence, but because Alejandro was in it, because it was the place where we built our life together. When I walked through the door, I found him in the kitchen, wearing an apron over his expensive suit, focused intently on something simmering on the stove. He looked up when I entered, and his face transformed with his genuine smile, the one that always made my heart skip a beat. "There's my wife," he said warmly, his voice filled with affection. "Here I am. What's for dinner? Risotto." "Yes, risotto. And before you ask, yes, I followed the recipe exactly. No improvising this time. Promise." "You're learning?" I teased, stepping closer and wrapping my arms around his waist. I have an excellent teacher, he murmured, pulling me close and kissing me thoroughly despite my protests that I was gross from work, covered in the grime and germs of the emergency room. How was the save? He asked, his voice serious. I told him about the surgery, about the teenager who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, about the moment when his vitals stabilized and I knew he'd make it, the surge of relief and triumph that washed over me. Alejandro listened with the same intensity he brought to everything, his dark eyes never leaving my face, as if my victories were as important as his business deals, as if the lives I saved were as valuable as the deals he brokered. I'm proud of you, he said when I finished, his voice low and sincere, for doing your job, for being exactly who you said you'd be, for not letting my world change the core of who you are. It's changed me, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I'm not the same woman who walked into this mansion 6 months ago. No, he agreed, his gaze unwavering. You're stronger, fiercer, more certain of yourself. But you're still Elena, still the woman who values life, who fights for people, who believes in redemption, even when it seems impossible. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle and loving. Still the woman I love more than I thought possible. Smooth talker, I teased, a smile playing on my lips. I learned from the best, he retorted, winking. We ate dinner together at the small table in the kitchen, the warm glow of the overhead light creating a cozy and intimate atmosphere. We rarely used the formal dining room anymore, preferring the intimacy of this space, the casual comfort of being together in the heart of the home. Afterward, we walked out to the terrace overlooking the lake, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars reflect off the water, creating a shimmering, ethereal landscape. I have news, Alejandro said quietly, his voice breaking the peaceful silence. My heart skipped a beat. In our world, news was rarely simple, rarely without complications. Good or bad? Good, he said, squeezing my hand reassuringly. I think the commission has asked me to mediate a dispute between 2 families in New York. A tense situation that could easily escalate into violence. They trust me to resolve it peacefully. That's wonderful, Alessandro. It's recognition, isn't it? They're acknowledging that what we're building here, this attempt at evolution, is worth respecting. They see the changes you've made, the positive impact you're having. It is, he agreed, a hint of pride in his voice. It means a week in New York, though, and I want you to come with me. I need you there by my side. Alessandro, I can't just... I already cleared it with your supervisor, he interrupted, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Called in a favor. You have the week off completely guilt-free. He turned me to face him, his expression serious and earnest. I know you need your independence, your career, your own life, but I also need you beside me for this. I need your perspective, your strength, your unwavering moral compass. Please, Elena, how could I say no to that? How could I deny him when he asked so honestly, when he gave me everything and asked for so little in return? Okay, I said, my voice soft. New York together. Together, he echoed, his voice filled with relief and affection. And then he kissed me under the stars. A long, lingering kiss that sealed our promise. A testament to our enduring love. Later that night, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets in our shared bedroom, we'd long since stopped pretending we needed separate wings, embracing the intimacy and comfort of sleeping next to each other. I thought about how far we'd come. From a forced marriage to a real partnership, from strangers to lovers, from simply surviving to actually living, thriving even against all odds. Elena! Alessandro's voice was drowsy, his arm heavy across my waist, a comforting weight. Thank you, he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. For what? For staying, for choosing this life, for choosing me, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I turned in his arms, pressing a kiss to his chest, over his heart. Thank you for being worth choosing, for giving me a reason to stay, for showing me that even in the darkest corners of the world, love can flourish. He held me closer, his grip tight and possessive. And in the darkness I felt completely safe, protected not just by his army of guards and walls of security, but by his love, by the choice we made every day to stay, to fight, to build something better, together. Outside, Chicago hummed with life, both light and dark, legal and illegal, beautiful and broken. A city of contrasts and contradictions. Our city, our world, our future, and we would face it together, hand in hand, heart to heart. Alejandro Vitali and his unlikely wife, proving that even in the darkest places, love could take root and grow, defying expectations and challenging assumptions. That redemption wasn't just possible, it was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing everything for. That sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the right one, the only one that truly mattered. Always together until death and beyond, bound by a love that transcended the boundaries of our world.